The next function to look at is that for a vehicle excise duty. Now, if we have a look at the question, we're told that vehicle excise duty varies according to CO2 emissions, and also that alternative fuel cars get a £10 discount per year. We're also told here that vehicle excise duty is charged per year. So there's three elements to this. The first is we need to know the CO2 emissions, and when we know the CO2 emissions, we can look up in this table to find out what the cost will be. Then we need to know if there is an alternative fuel discount, and if there is, we will subtract that, okay, from the charge of vehicle excise duty. Finally, we need to know how many years the term of the lease is going to be for, because that is how many years worth of vehicle excise duty we need to charge. So let's start by looking up the basic value of vehicle excise duty. So again, we're going to use this FX button to insert a function, and the one that we're going to use this time is called VLOOKUP. And it's VLOOKUP because it's a vertical lookup for a vertical table, and what we're going to do is we're going to look up the value. So here's our lookup value. We're going to look up the value of CO2 in the table on the other worksheet. Okay, so in here, I'm going to click on the CO2, which is C7, and that's the value we're going to look up in the table. So where's the table that we're going to look up? That is in the charges worksheet. So if we click on charges, we can now see our table here. And this is the bit that we're going to look up. We're not including the titles. We're just looking up the CO2 value in this column here, and we want it to return the cost. Okay, now because we want it to return the cost is in the second column. So our column index number here will be 2 to say that we want it to return the value in the second column. So let's see if we're happy with that. Let's click on OK. It's come up with £30. So 115 grams per kilogram. Let's go to charges. 115, it's bigger than 0, bigger than 101, bigger than 111, but it's not bigger than 121. So £30 is what we expected it to come up with. That's great. We can test other figures if you want to, and I would recommend that you do. Now if we look here, we've got our lookup function, and here's our lookup function. Okay, so it does a vertical lookup of C7, which is a CO2, in that table on the charges worksheet, and it looks up column number 2. Now we need to subtract the discount if there is a discount for alternative fuel. So to subtract, we're of course going to use the minus key. So that will subtract. Now we need an if function to determine if there was an alternative fuel. If there was, we're going to subtract the £10 discount. If not, we're not going to subtract anything. So we'll use the fx function again, and this time we want if added to our functions. So double click on if. Here we go, it started to put the if function in for us. So our logical test is going to be if alternative fuel is true. So if, no, it's not going to let me click on it. What we'll do is we'll click on the cell next to it and come across. It's still going to be a pain. So the easiest thing to do here is just type it in. So C5. If C5, that means if C5 is true. If it is, okay, so if the value is true, we want to subtract £10. Otherwise, we're not going to subtract anything, so that'll be 0. If we have a look up here, what it's done is it says if C5 is true, right, then £10, otherwise 0. So let's try it out. Okay, so if we keep changing alternative fuel, false and true, you can see the vehicle excise duty changing. Right, finally, this now needs to be multiplied by the term. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put brackets around the whole lot. So just before VLOOKUP and at the end, because we want to multiply the whole lot, not just the if function or not just the VLOOKUP function. And then we're going to multiply, so that's a star, by 3. Okay, so we press enter. There's our vehicle excise duty of £60. Let's change this to 4 years. Okay, look, notice it hasn't changed. Right, now that's because we just multiplied it by the number 3. What we actually wanted to do was multiply it by the term, which is C3. So if I put in C3, it's now going to multiply by the term. Notice now that's £80. Okay, if I change the term to 3, our vehicle excise duty changes to £60. So just be careful that you make sure you use cell references and not the actual numbers that you type in. The one number that is okay to type in is the £10 discount, because that's not something that was on the charges worksheet. So that's the end of our vehicle excise duty tutorial.